We now come to the urgent question. Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Defence if he will make a statement on Russia's aggression relating to Ukraine and the situation in Georgia. Thank you.
Speaker, we are on day 811 of Putin's so-called special military operation, an operation that was supposed to last for 3 days, and he has failed in all of his objectives. But of course the conflict is evolving and challenging. Russia's newly formed northern grouping of forces have attacked into Ukraine's Kharkiv region, taking control of several villages. By opening up an additional attack, an axis of attack, Russia is almost certainly attempting to divert Ukrainian resources away from other parts of the front line and to threaten Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, we will not be diverted from our commitment to provide Ukraine with the support they need to prevail. Because, Mr. Speaker, Ukraine will prevail. In April, the Prime Minister announced our largest ever and most comprehensive package of equipment from the United Kingdom, including long-range strike, air defence, artillery, reconnaissance, protected mobility, development of Ukraine's navy and airfield enablement, and munitions to support the introduction of the F-16. The Prime Minister also announced £500 million of additional funding, which takes us to £3 billion annually in the UK military aid for Ukraine this financial year. We continue to work with international allies and partners to cohere and coordinate our support to Ukraine, including through the international capability coalitions, where we co-lead the maritime and drone coalitions. We recently announced a complete package of £325 million for cutting-edge drones. This will deliver more than 10,000 drones for the Ukrainian armed forces. In March, we were pleased to congratulate the first 10 Ukrainian pilots to complete their basic flying training in the United Kingdom. These trainees join more than 65,000 Ukrainians who have received training in the UK since 2014, including over 39,000 recruits since 2022 through Operation Interflex. Turning to Georgia, Mr. Speaker, we continue to observe with concern the events in Tbilisi, including yesterday's violent clashes in and around the Georgian Parliament and the intimidation of peaceful protesters. The United Kingdom, along with our partners, is of course committed to the right of peaceful protest, and we are concerned by the introduction of the law on transparency of foreign influence. The UK is a close friend to Georgia, and as such we call for calm and restraint on all sides. We hope to continue to work with Georgia, with whom we have a deep and long-standing partnership, and to support the legitimate aspirations of the Georgian people as they pursue a free, sovereign and democratic future.
Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all thank you for granting the UQ? We much appreciate it, and on an issue that's very important. Can I thank the Minister for his very helpful response, and for other members who, right honourable members who have stayed behind. Having woke up to reports of Ukraine attempting to push back in the Kharkiv region, only to find the Russian Defence Ministry has claimed its air forces have destroyed 10 long-range missiles known as ATACMS that Ukraine's military launched overnight at Crimea. The media reporting may have settled down, but the situation over there is as volatile as it has ever been, and the rippling effect in this entire region is continuing. At a time when Blinken from President Biden's administration visits Ukraine to give physical and military assistance to Ukraine and encouragement, the Minister will understand that Georgia is pushing forward legislation as Russia tries to restore its empire of old and control all of its former satellite states. The Russian threat is clearly undermining the democratic process of this entire region. And whilst I understand and agree with the UK's clear and public stance of support for Ukraine, and I congratulate the Government and the Minister on what has been done and what will be done in the future, the current situation does, I believe, demand further action. And I'm very keen to get the Minister's response on what that further action will be. I'd ask the Minister to make clear what further enhanced help we can give to facilitate the democratic process, as well as the vital military aid necessary in this region. The war, which began in 2022, is on the precipice, and I am asking how we can ensure that the result is a victory for democracy, for freedom, for liberty, not simply for Ukraine, but also for Georgia and for all of us globally. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for asking this question. It's an extremely good and valid question, because he sets the question of Ukraine within the regional context of the influence that Russia has sought to exert over its former satellite state. He's right to point out, Mr. Speaker, that the front line in Ukraine is turbulent. A full picture is yet to emerge. But what we can be certain of, Mr. Speaker, is our continued resolve to ensure that our Ukrainian friends prevail. The ongoing visit of Secretary Blinken, I think, reminds us of the remarkable heft and scale of Western support of which we play our part very proudly. And I think that is the unavoidable direction of travel, that the resolute support of the friends of Ukraine will help it prevail despite turbulence and despite the attempts of Russia to create a new dynamic on what is a very turbulent front line. He asked some very cogent questions about Georgia, and he's right to point out that Georgia knows more than any other country about the deprivations of a Russian invasion following the horrifying events of 2008. We are very clear, Mr. Speaker, that Georgia has the sovereign right to pursue its own autonomous and sovereign path. If it seeks to turn its eyes to the West towards NATO membership and to maybe membership of the European Union, that is the sovereign right of Georgia to forge that own destiny. We will continue to cooperate in earnest and sincere partnership with the Georgians, with whom we have a very meaningful defence relationship. I've had the pleasure of visiting Tbilisi twice as a Foreign Office Minister and seeing the tremendous institutional work we do with the Georgians, who have a fine defence tradition.
Chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee, Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the government share my view that just as Soviet failure in Afghanistan led considerably towards the downfall of the Soviet Empire, Putin's failure in Ukraine could have a similar effect on his future and his ambitions? And is it any coincidence at all that this renewed Russian attack is taking place before the aid which America has belatedly decided to give to Ukraine has a chance to arrive?
Minister.
So to my right honourable friend's question is yes. And one can see the extraordinary mobilisation of Russian state and society and the huge expenditure that Putin was having to make to maintain momentum in his failed military operation as confirmation, actually, of long-term weakness.
We now come to Shadow Minister Luke Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the honourable member for Strangford for securing this urgent question. It's now 811 days since Putin began the full-scale illegal invasion of Ukraine. Russia has opened a renewed offensive in the Kharkiv region, but Ukrainians are continuing to fight with huge courage. The UK is totally united in support of Ukraine. The Shadow Defence Secretary and Shadow Foreign Secretary were in Kyiv for the last 2 days and reaffirmed that Labour's commitment to Ukraine is ironclad. If Putin wins, he will not stop at Ukraine. That is why the government have had and will continue to have Labour's fullest support for military aid to Ukraine and for reinforcing NATO's allies across Eastern Europe. Every commitment of UK military aid since Putin invaded has had Labour's fullest support, and that will continue. With a general election later this year, there may be a change to Labour, but there will be no change to Britain's resolve in standing with Ukraine, confronting Russian aggression and pursuing Putin for his war crimes. On Georgia, we're deeply concerned by the increased pressure on civil society freedoms and intimidation of protesters. The proposed draft law is not in line with the democratic values and risks taking Georgia away from the Euro-Atlantic aspirations of the Georgian people. What discussions has the Minister had with the US, the EU and other regional partners on the latest developments in Georgia? Is the UK putting Georgia on the agenda for the G7 meeting in Italy and the upcoming EPC? What steps is he taking with our allies to counter Russian disinformation and hybrid activities in Georgia and across the Caucasus, Western Balkans and the rest of Europe? And on Ukraine, can I ask, what support is being given to help Ukraine build up their air defences to stop air and drone strikes on critical infrastructure, especially in the Kharkiv region? And how much of the money has been committed to the International Fund for Ukraine has been spent and how much is left to be spent. Mr. Speaker, the UK will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes for them to win.
I'm glad that he pointed out the remarkable courage of our Ukrainian friends in terms of their efforts to counter the new axis of advance in the Kharkiv region. And we sincerely welcome the continued cross-party support of our support to Ukraine. He expressed the concern that we do share about the new law passed in Georgia, and it is on the agenda of our discussions with allies. I can't comment, it's beyond my scope, Mr. Speaker, to comment on what might be on the agenda for the G7 or the EPC, but it is certainly an issue of concern that we do discuss with trusted partners and have done very frequently recently. A huge amount of institutional effort is going into countering disinformation from our side across the entire region and as well as the Western Balkans and Central Asia, the former so-called satellite states of Russia that have a particular vulnerability to disinformation from the Kremlin. And I won't go into details about that effort, but that is that's a significant piece of work, Mr. Speaker, which will continue to be extremely important. He asked a good question about air defence. Of course, we have gifted thousands of units of air defence to Ukraine. There will surely be more to come, and the uplift in finance, in financial support that we have announced, clearly that will be an issue for the Ukrainians and through our gifting programme, but air defence will feature largely in that.
Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Alicia Cairns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this really important, urgent question. On Georgia, the brutalisation of peaceful, ordinary Georgians and hospitalisation of opposition leader David Katsarava is utterly shameful. So can the Minister please assure us that he will protest directly to the Georgian government and call on the ambassador regarding the abuses of the public that we are seeing on our screens daily? On Ukraine, the fall of Avdiivka at the start of this year was a shameful result of Allied inaction to get Ukraine what it needed. That falls on us. We cannot now see the same take place in Kharkiv, which is under assault for exactly the reasons set out already in this discussion. So can the Minister please assure us that sufficient ammunition is reaching the front line now, and also update us on what we are doing to procure sufficient artillery shells, because Ukraine, as ever, needs us to give them enough to win and not just to survive.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you to the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. We, of course, expressed our concerns about the direction of travel with regard to protests in Georgia, and the Foreign Office, I know, has made those representations to the ambassador here and will continue to keep a watching brief on that issue. She asked about Kharkiv. Of course, ammunition supply is a central component of our efforts, both politically and in terms of what we are gifting and sourcing. We've given over 300,000 units of ammunition, but we acknowledge that we must all, in the Western and Friendly Nations Coalition, we must all mobilise to a far greater degree. That's why we think initiatives coming from the Czech side and across all European and NATO partners are important, and we must strain every sinew to ensure that the flow continues.
Person Martin Docherty, use.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In terms of cross-party support, that's shared on these benches as well. And let me also congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Strangford, for gaining the UQ. I wonder, in terms of what we can additionally do for Ukraine following the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, does the Minister agree it's now time for the UK to join with other NATO allies in supporting the Chechnya munitions programme on top of what's already been provided? And in terms of Georgia, the government states that its aim is to advance Georgia's Euro-Atlantic integration and security cooperation and support for democratic reforms. Can the Minister advise the House, given the Dream Party's lurch away from democratic reform, how stable is this integration and security cooperation? And does the Minister agree with me that it's time for the people of Georgia to have their say on the Dream Party's agenda?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his questions. We have not joined the Czech programme because it would replicate work we are already doing, but we commend its activities and we see it as part of a broader solution to mobilising effort to increase the flow of munitions. So it is welcome. On the political future of Georgia, clearly that is a question for the Georgians themselves. But what we do note is that there is a very lively debate, which is of course spilled out onto the streets of Tbilisi, about the direction of travel. And I agree with the honourable gentleman that those dictating the direction of travel, whether it be in the Euro-Atlantic direction or anything else, should be a function of the democratic expression of the people of Georgia.
I applaud the number of personnel trained under Op Interflex, but does the Minister support my call to further extend Op Interflex to train Ukrainian female defender volunteers?
Mr. Speaker, yes, of course, we will train whoever the Ukrainians send us.
Sir Chris Brown. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I warned in 2014 that if we kept on feeding the crocodile, the danger was that we would be the last on the menu, which is why it's so important that we get these next steps right over the next 2 years in relation to making sure that Putin doesn't win in Ukraine. Two things still perplex me. One is, why have we and our allies not dramatically ramped up the production of the artillery that Ukraine actually needs as a united team? And secondly, why have we yet to seize Russian state assets sitting in British and European banks and repurpose them for reparations to pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine?
Mr. Speaker, we are ramping up the production of artillery right across European and states beyond Europe. That is a complex effort involving the military industrial base, but those steps are in place, and we are seeing, I'm confident we will see an increase in supply. He asked about state assets. Of course, we want that to be the outcome, but the route must be legal.
Francois.
Thank you, sir. We in Britain, relative to the size of our army, have given more military equipment to Ukraine than anyone. We've now given them all of our heavy artillery to help them fight. Kharkiv cannot be allowed to fall. But let's be honest, all the kit the Ukrainians need to have already won this war has been sitting in American storage depots for 2 years, from F-16s to long-range missiles. When are we going to get it through to the occupant of the White House that if he carries on dithering and the Russians take Kharkiv, not only do the Ukrainians lose, he loses too, literally?
Right Honourable Friend makes a very pertinent and correct point. Of course, we led as hard as we could in the aftermath of the invasion and led the way with the critical provision of systems such as NLAW. And of course, historians will reflect on whether or not the months following the invasion were an opportunity missed to give a decisive advantage to our Ukrainian friends. But our focus now is on ensuring that in the round and overwhelmingly the combined effect of the huge package from the United States now, as well as ours and all friendly nations, can ensure that they will maintain the defence and ultimately the liberation of their sovereign homeland.
Jamie Stone.
Speaker, some time ago I asked the Prime Minister about a relationship with Turkey. Now, we might have some issues with Turkey, but the fact remains that geographically, next door to Georgia, its strategic position is crucial. Furthermore, Turkey has very important links with many of the players in this deeply dangerous situation. So can I ask, what conversations is the Foreign Office having with Ankara about resolving this situation?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think I can answer on behalf of my cross-departmental colleagues. I'm thinking many conversations, and we recognise the centrality of Turkey's importance as a strong NATO ally and a nation with tremendous military confidence, which has also made a remarkable contribution to the defence of Ukraine's sovereignty by the provision of the remarkable Bayraktar weapon system.
Mark Pritchard.
Speaker, on Georgia, can I welcome the Minister saying the UK government wants to continue to work with Georgia, and that's quite right. But is he aware of the comments of the senior US State Department official Jim O'Brien, who yesterday said that the relationship to the US and Georgia could be reviewed, could be at risk, and possibly restrictions, financial and travel, could be imposed? But is it not the case? All of that can be avoided if the Georgian government drop this foreign agents law, or at least significantly amend it.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend is right, and he speaks with authority, and he is right in his analysis. Of course, we note the US view, and we have expressed our concerns. And what we will continue to do is use our strong relationship with the Georgians to ensure that they amend, for their own interest, their behaviour.
Alex Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leeds is sister city as Kharkiv. The people of Leeds are gravely concerned that the invasion of Kharkiv is imminent. Colleagues have already asked about artillery shells in short supply, but even bullets are in short supply. What is the UK doing to supply the Ukraine defence of Kharkiv with bullets? Also, are we upscaling humanitarian aid to Kharkiv and utilising that for evacuation of civilians who want to leave? And will the UK government supply additional visas for Kharkivians who want to come to the UK because the people of Leeds are ready to welcome them into their homes?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the question from the member for Leeds, the sister city, I now realise, which is interesting. What we are doing is putting more money than ever before into our support to lethal aid for Ukraine, an additional £500 million, which will take our support this year to £3 billion. A lot of that will go on munitions, but of course humanitarian is also significant, and that is an important part of the picture.
Speaker, like any bully, Russia will advance if they feel that the West is not supporting Ukraine. And they've seen that we've not been supporting it enough in the West because of the lack of ammunition that's been going on. The shortage of ammunition for any soldier in the field, as the Minister is fully aware, is crucial to their confidence and their morale. So can we have a biggest push we possibly can that what the Americans have said is actually in the front line. I saw this morning that they said some of the ammunition has already arrived. Has it already arrived? And what is the timetable for the rest? Because it's completely unfair on the armed forces out there.
Well, Mr. Speaker, his analogy of my right honourable friend's analogy of Russia as a bully is absolutely correct. We are focused on increasing ammunition supplies, and my judgment is that the £61 billion package from the US side, combined with our additional support, will result in tangible improvement in terms of the operational situation on the front line.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we know, Georgia, alongside Ukraine, aspire to join NATO. Does the Minister therefore agree it's really important that Georgia respect peaceful protest? And regarding Ukraine, with the Russians closing in an artillery range with Kharkiv, what military delivery of support can we deliver now to prevent Russia from being able to bombard the city of Kharkiv, which would be catastrophic for the civilian population?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with his analysis with regard to Georgia's NATO aspirations. That is clear. And the support we can give now is to continue our remarkable supply of lethal aid, and particularly with regards to air defence. Ben Birch.
What Putin is doing in Georgia now is exactly the same as he tried to do in Ukraine 10 years ago. Yet the British government, unlike the American government, doesn't seem to be thinking of any recalibration at all with the current Georgian regime, which is beating up its own citizens in the streets of Tbilisi. I mean, why hasn't he at least summoned the Georgian ambassador in London? What action has he taken, rather than just words, to make our views completely clear to the current Georgian government that their behaviour and this legislation is unacceptable?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in truth, those are questions for my colleagues in the Foreign Department. But our analysis is that the strong relationship we have with the Georgians in the defence sector is an important means of ensuring that their direction of travel is a positive one.
There's growing concern across Central and Northern Europe about the issue in Georgia. will he have conversations with his own colleagues in government to ensure that our partners across Europe, that their commitment to NATO is increased to prepare for the undoubted expansionism that Putin is engaged in currently and is probably going to step up in the coming months?
Speaker, the answer is yes, and of course he will observe, like I do, that actually the consequence of Putin's effort to demonstrate NATO's weakness has been exactly the opposite. NATO is now larger and stronger than it was before February 2022, and we will lead the way in ensuring that all members meet the investment required to be a member of that tremendous defensive alliance.
No.
Mr. Speaker, I congratulate my honourable friend in securing this urgent question. The United Kingdom has led the world in supporting Ukraine militarily, economically, diplomatically and politically. And as a former sanctions minister, I saw the real impact that the United Kingdom could do with its partners working together on this. However, there is a real loophole with regard to the international strategy in cutting off Putin's finances. The United Nations peacekeeping force, for which we are a member, currently procures its military helicopters from Russia. And therefore that money goes back into Putin's pockets. Can I ask the Minister, was he or the government aware of this? Now that they are, will the government raise this at the G7 to urgently ensure we cut off Putin's finances?
Well, I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker, for my honourable friend raising that, and I will ensure my colleague, the Sanctions Minister, takes that into account.
Very agree,
Mr. Speaker, we are united in our determination to support Ukraine as it seeks to defeat Putin. Labour welcomed the creation of a new UK-Latvian drone capability coalition earlier this year and the UK commitment to spend £200 million on drones for Ukraine. Can the Minister confirm when the first drones under that initiative will be delivered to Ukrainian forces?
Very soon.
Mr. Speaker, as chair of the Georgia All-Party Group, I have watched the demonstrations in Tbilisi with no little concern. Whilst I have noticed no new movement of Georgia towards Russia culturally, economically or militarily, as some have been suggesting, it would appear that the current Georgian Dream government are becoming more ready to use the apparatus of the state, sometimes with violence, to suppress political dissent, free speech and the media. So will my right honourable friend impress on his Georgian counterpart, as an ally and as a friend, that this is not how democratic countries behave if they wish to join Western institutions and participate as a free democratic values country?
Well, my honourable friend is correct. Georgia must live up to the standard required if it's to be sincere about its democratic aspirations, and we do make that point to our friends in Georgia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, we're all rightly proud of the skills of our armed forces personnel and the training that they're providing through Operation Interflex for Ukrainians. But that, I understand, is only designated up until this summer. So can the Minister now confirm that that programme will continue for as long as it's needed?
Wholeheartedly, Mr. Speaker, our commitment to training our Ukrainian allies is enduring. And of course, we will always respond to the type and form of training that they themselves require.
Sean Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The events in the United States and the understandable focus on the conflict in Gaza and the unacceptable loss of life there have led some to argue that our support for Ukraine is wavering. Would the Minister seek to put a stop to that deliberate disinformation by setting out that our support for Ukraine is absolute, that we stand in solidarity with them in their fight against Putin's illegal aggression, that their battle is indeed, that they are battling in some respects on our behalf, because Putin's aggression, as we see, will not stop with the Ukraine? And would he, given that, will he set out how we are going to ensure that the ammunition that is so desperately needed gets to the front line as quickly as possible?
Speaker, I welcome that question, and by any measure, our commitment to Ukraine is significant and unwavering. And of course, recently that was expressed by the increase in our annual support from £2.5 billion worth of lethal aid to £3 billion worth, and by the 100-year defensive alliance signed by the Prime Minister with President Zelensky on his recent visit to Kyiv.
Thank you. I would like to thank my colleague and friend for securing this urgent question, and in doing so, Minister, I want to ask, what help and support are we as a nation given to those countries in Eastern Europe that feel under threat, such as Estonia, from the potential threat of Putin wanting to expand back into what was former Russian territory?
Speaker, that's a very good question, and the support we are giving is welcoming them as brothers, brother and sister countries into the NATO, the defensive NATO alliance. And of course, in our case, we are very proud to have our enhanced forward presence battle group in Tallinn and Estonia. And of course, any members who, like me, have visited that battle group know that there's a tremendous esprit de corps which generated by the tremendous joint defensive work carried out by our British soldiers alongside their Estonian allies.